Welcome to the space where creators have aligned a positive and intellectual collab of open minds. For sharing and learning from one another, it's a vibe. ReadswithRosa podcast on the mic. Subscribe, educator spitting bars. I guess you didn't know I'm multifaceted and humble, taking off life goals. The classroom is my comfort zone where I plant and sow seeds of knowledge, compassion, empathy, and hope. Reading is the key to unlocking your potential. Countless benefits, including cognitive and mental. Regardless of the genre, books are highly influential. Go get yours, I'll get mine. Making strides, monumental. And rock with me and get down to this new jam. With my friends, I had a very simple plan. Educate the masses through books and life lessons. It's the grand slam. I'm out. Tala Falava and welcome to the Reads with Rosa podcast. I am super excited to introduce today's guest. She is a fellow middle school educator, originally from California, but currently based in Fukuoka, southern Japan. She is also an Amigurumi artist, a crochet plushie creator. And last year, she unveiled a human-sized crocheted Totoro, the adorable character from the 1988 animated film My Neighbor Totoro. It is my honor to welcome to the show, Julia Tachibana. Woohoo! Hey, sis.
Hey.
Hi, how are you?
Thanks so much for having me on. It is an honor.
How are things down there in southern Japan?
It's not too bad. The weather's kind of on and off. We've had some really nice days, like those classic spring days, but then a bit of rain. Like yesterday was rainy, so it's a little bit up and down. But
yeah, I know. Honestly, this spring weather, like up here as well, the spring weather is so whack. Like it's like 20 plus one day, and then it's 7 degrees. And I mean, what is that? What is that? My island body cannot deal.
I'm just like, let's like prolong this, even if it's rain before the crazy, disgusting summer. Like I'm good with rain, not
not me. I'm the opposite. I'm like, hit me,
you
sunshine.
like it?
Hit me. I love summer.
Well, I love summer. I just don't like summer in Japan.
Well, anything that's not winter, I'm all good. You give us a brief introduction. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, my name is Julia Tachibana. I have been teaching middle school, mostly English, but since coming to Fukuoka, a little bit of design classes. I've been teaching for I think it's about 10 years, give or take, in California for about 5 years, and then now it's been about 5 years in Japan. And what brought me to Japan was a bit just interesting circumstances. My mom has schizophrenia, a pretty severe mental illness, and wasn't doing well. And so I didn't aim, or I didn't really set out to become an international educator, an international school educator. It was more like, let me go for family reasons. I need a job. Oh, this kind of fell into my lap. I'll do this. And I'm grateful because it's taught me a lot. And, I've learned a little bit about the IB and NYP and just the international school scene in general, which we could maybe get into later. But I continue to do a lot of mental health advocacy on the side, and that's a huge passion as well as the amigurumi stuff. So yeah, it's been kind of a wild ride, a very long 5 years. I finally do feel ready to go back to America, though. I miss my friends. So
did you do classes? Did you have, I know like I have JapaneseAmerican friends and they talk about Saturday classes. Did you grow up doing that in Cali or not so much?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I was lucky / unlucky. Like lucky because I didn't have to do the whole, like cram school on Saturdays kind of thing. I think at one point my mom probably wanted me to go to like Kumon or something to practice my Japanese, but she taught me. I remember her sitting me down, having me write out hiragana, katakana, a little bit of kanji, and even that was like, oh, for me, like I just didn't really want to do it. But I'm grateful because at least I can read a little bit. My kanji's whack. Like a lot of my friends who are not Japanese can read and write a lot better than I can. But now as an adult, it's like, oh yeah, I wish I was a bit more literate. Conversation's fine, but reading is difficult. So, I think there's good and bad with kind of putting your kid into one of those programs because they're really rigorous. But then you have that foundation for life, right? So, good and bad with that. Yeah.
Interesting. And what about books and reading? Do you have memories of being a reader as a younger child, or is it something that you picked up later on, in college or perhaps in high school?
Mhm. First of all, I love what you do. I think your platform's amazing, and just like that emphasis on literacy and reading and highlighting, people of color, like artists and um, uh, authors and things like that. But yeah, I think for me, reading was really huge. It was definitely a way in which I escaped because
Mm,
I grew up in a pretty turbulent household. I think I didn't grow up with a lot of books in the house though.
mm,
It was more like, let's go to the library and check them out. And I really have to give my mom a lot of credit. It was a weekly thing to go. She'd let us just, roam around for about an hour. And I just like, it was like, eating up books. Like just I had this voracious appetite. And I remember being like, how many babysitters clubs can I get in, one go, and just grabbing as many as I could. And really like reading 2 to 3 a day, like just, like this. And I especially loved books like Matilda, a lot of the Roald Dahl books. There's some controversy there, but
mm,
a lot of those books were these young sort of often like orphan kids. I was not an orphan, but go through hardships. Like even Harry Potter, he's very much mistreated. And I
mm,
grew up in this wealthy area, Palo Alto, but my family was very fractured. There was a lot of abuse, a lot of kind of secrets, a lot of just really unpleasant things happening. And almost because I lived in sort of this high profile
mm,
area, and you couldn't really talk to anyone about it. Everyone else seemed super happy and put together, and so, you're walking around carrying these things, and for me, it was like, "This book, like, this kid gets it," you know?
mm,
Wow, their stepmother is being horrible, and my grandmother's being horrible, or my father's being horrible, and so
mm.
for me, that was how I connected and felt seen, and so, yeah, reading's been huge, and I continue to do it and really, really love, reading from different people's perspectives as well.
Mm. I wanted to ask about being Asian American in America.
Mm,
Uh, you know, I know only recently in the past few years, they've really been, we've been reading or seeing a lot of media footage on, Asian American hate crimes. But I know that's not something that's just happened. For you growing up, were you mistreated because you were Asian American or
mm,
Asian American, well, Japanese?
yeah.
Do you know? Did you
Yeah,
go
no, I
through that in
totally
school?
I know what you're getting at, especially with COVID, right? Like, I think it started with like, "Oh, let's use this reason of like,
Mm,
bats and, ooh, Asian and Asian food,"
mm,
to like, "Oh, let's target and let's let out all these like kind of misnotions we already
mm,
have, like, let's just spew that out." Um, and yeah, I think definitely it was difficult growing up as Asian American, and I think more specifically Japanese American, because there's not a whole lot of Japanese Americans, I'd say, unless you're in one of those sort of, um, small like diasporas. It's sort of like,
mm,
that's the right word. I'm like, I think that's the right word. Or one of those small communities that are, deliberately sort of set up with like a lot of Japanese stores, and it's. I think I could be wrong. Maybe it's changed
mm,
since the last time I read the statistic, but I think Japanese Americans are most likely to assimilate. They're one of the Asian groups that tend not to stay together. Maybe not as much as like let's say Korean Americans or
mm,
other Asian communities. So looking around, I only knew like one or two other Japanese Americans. They were not in my grade. They were older, and so I already felt like a bit of a minority being Asian American, and then it
mm,
was like, but I'm also Japanese American, which is different from everyone else, and yeah, just I was very embarrassed to speak Japanese. When I get a phone call at school or something, I would, just try not to speak Japanese or kind of
mm.
like lower my voice. Really disliked bringing bentos, and it's so silly because now bentos all the rage, and it's
Right?
my sushi rolls and like, or if you're Korean, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
kimchi, oh, so cool. But that was not the case.
Mm.
And despite all the sort of quote unquote acceptance, I still feel a bit uh othered a lot, like in the
Mm.
workplace, back where I was teaching in America. I'd bring these sort of elaborate bentos sometimes because I had the energy to put it together. And
Yeah.
even, you have half the staff being like, oh, cool. But then, some people sort of being like, giving you a bit of this sort of suspicious look or like, what's that? And it's sad. That's like deeply rooted in
Mhm.
American culture sometimes, this tendency to go, I don't know what that is, like that's foreign and therefore it's gross, it's weird, and like that's not okay. Which is
Mm.
so silly because it's like it's just food, and can we just not make people feel bad about their food?
Right?
Um, yeah.
So then you're now in Japan. What is it like to be Japanese American in Japan? Or can you just be Japanese?
Mm. It is, I feel like, growing up, I would come to Japan every once in a while, like, once, not every summer, but on
Mm.
some summers I came. And I always felt like in America, it was like, "Oh, you're Asian, and that's not cool." But then in Japan, it's like, "Oh, you're from America. That's really cool." So I definitely kinda had my sort of, like, feel good moments in Japan. You felt, quite celebritized. I don't know
Mm.
if that's the right term, if that is the term, but, I'm sure you experienced that a bit as, quote unquote "gaijin," where it's like, "Oh, like,
Mm.
you're so different, so ethnic," and, I mean, that quickly turns into gawking and
Mm.
inappropriateness, but I think for me, at least with America, there is this sort of obsession that's more on the positive side where it's like, "Oh, that's glamorous, that's cool, you speak English."
Mm.
So I wouldn't say like pump that up or anything, but I definitely, I didn't mind the positive attention that I would often get. These days it's interesting. I will say I have privilege. I definitely acknowledge my privilege because I feel I can play both cards. Like I
Mm.
look Japanese, I can speak Japanese, so I can be perceived as Japanese, but at the same time, and that comes in handy when, let's say, I'm trying to, fill out a form or, do some sort of, um, you know, like logistical thing. Um,
Mm.
but then on the other hand, if I think Japanese customs, certain ways of being, like it's quite stifling sometimes. You have to be super polite. You have to be, really just it's always about giving and considering everyone else. And on those days where I don't really want to be that much of a team
Mm.
player, I kind of like bring out my Americanness and I'm like, yeah, I can do that, which is like such privilege, right? And then to be
Mm.
like, I can do that because I, you know, like legitimately am American and I'm gonna tap into that. Or I mean, it doesn't even have to be that, just I think um looking a certain way. I think most people see me as Japanese, like when a Japanese person will often look at me and probably be like, "Oh, she's Japanese," or at least maybe
Mm.
like, part Japanese. And then, but then I'll like say something. I think it's my mannerisms and how I carry,
Right.
kind of dance a bit. You see their face, like their face goes from like to like,
Uh.
why is she
Uh.
speaking like a toddler, not like a, you know? And so if I like I can't write kanji, and so if
Mm.
I can't fill out a form, I can lean into my foreignness and be like, "Oh, wakarimasen,"
Mm.
"Dekimasu, can you write it for me?" Um, and yeah, I see that as privilege because I think, um, we don't have to write things. We can
Mm.
just have someone do it for us.
I want to get into teaching.
Mm.
You are a middle school educator. Just for everyone listening or watching, I met Julia in October, in
Can I
October
tell
last
everyone
year.
can I
Oh
tell
yeah,
everyone
go
this
ahead,
story?
go
Oh, yeah,
ahead.
I'm like, I wanna make this in because I think Rosa's
Dozo.
amazing. We were finally able to have, like, an in-person conference. My school
Mm.
had one. And so we had quite a few schools, right, from different parts of Japan. It was just Japan, though? I don't even remember.
Yeah, it was the
Yeah.
first. Yeah, it was definitely the first conference I had been to in 2 years.
Mhm,
I was
mhm.
like, yo, I'm going. I put my
Yeah,
hand up.
yeah, 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 yeah. So, there's different breakout sessions, people from, like, Yokohama and, Kobe and all these different places, and I think it was toward one of the sessions toward the end, it was like an inclusion,
Mm.
kind of special ed, session, and, I look over and I see this girl, and then she's like, "Yeah, I'm Rosa, I teach social justice," and I'm just like, this girl is dope. Like, there was just something about you that was very much like, wow, she has a presence. I just feel like you really emanate this real sense of, I don't know, like you have a strong identity. I think you are just so educationally minded. I don't know. There's just this great aura I get from you, and
Thank
so
you. Thank you.
I remember when I first saw you, I was like, I need to be friends with her. I remember I came over and I was like, this is my line, this is my number. Like, can we meet? And then I did not think this podcast would happen, but it did. And again, I feel very honored. Like, I feel grateful that I'm on. So thank you.
I mean, no, like, yeah, it was funny because that was the last session of the day, that day for me.
Yeah, it
And
was pretty
it
late.
was kind of like real, like, honestly, like the ones before, it was all good, but I was just kind of like real. I was distracted. I was not really engaged. I really wanted more. Then I come
Mm.
to this session, this last one of the day, and I'm like, yo, okay, that's what I'm talking about. And then I saw you, and then I also met a New Zealand teacher, the
Oh,
most
right, right. I
random.
remember you guys had this instant
I was
connection.
like
That was
random as
beautiful.
like Pacific Islander meeting another like a
Yeah,
Maori teacher.
yeah.
It was amazing. Then I met you. Yeah, but
Mm.
honestly, then when I looked at your Instagram page, because like, man, I'm always looking for just interesting stories, different
Mhm.
stories, not different
Mhm, mhm.
journeys to
Yeah.
highlight through the podcast. And then when I saw that you were also creative and an artist, I was like, hey, what? Okay, cool. Because I love to bring on educators. Absolutely, man,
Mm.
that's my thing. Because
Oh, thank
even though we're
you.
all teachers, everyone has a journey. Like, everyone has a different story in terms of how they got into teaching and struggles and whatnot. So when I was like, yo, I want to find a way to get you on the show. So
Oh, that
yeah,
means so
so
much.
I'm
Thank
so
you.
grateful that
Mutual. The love
you
is mutual.
that you said yes. And but yeah, I mean, teaching and
Mm.
what got you into teaching, what inspired you to get into it? Where did
Mm.
that motivation come from?
Mm-mm. Oh, wait, one thing I wanna add, though, is I think you mentioned you're Samoan, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so the very first school I worked at in California, it was a pretty rough school. It was it's situated in a place where there's a lot of poverty, and I would say a majority of the kids were Latino, but then there was also
Mm,
this sort of subsection of Polynesian kids, and just their culture was so rich and so beautiful, and we would have like a polycultural day, and
oh,
and just like I kind of helped. Put that assembly together. And like once I got a grant, we got these like fresh sleighs, and I helped them choreograph this dance. Or no, I didn't, but the kids did. And I just sort of watched them do it. But like just you can tell these kids like they have this beautiful part to them, but like that's often silenced by the
mm.
majority, right? And I don't know, I just when I met you and I heard you were from somewhere, I just brought back so many memories of my kids, and I'm like, and really in Japan you don't really often run into a lot of people from the Polynesian Islands. I feel like you
Mm.
guys are more of a minority, so that was super cool, and I was like, oh, I definitely want to speak with her. So
You
yeah.
need to come to Tokyo
Oh,
because you'll see you'll
that's
come across
really
like
interesting. I
Fijians,
see.
Tongans, Samoans. There's
Mm.
us from Australia, New Zealand.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
yeah, I know quite a few now from Australia and New Zealand, but yeah.
so you'll meet a
Huh,
lot of PIs,
interesting.
Pacific Islanders, or
Got
Polynesian
it,
folks
got
from the US, from Australia, New
it.
Zealand, up here. So
That's where you're at.
let us know when you come down or come up,
Nice.
and then we'll
Yeah,
introduce
yeah,
you to
yeah, yeah,
some
yeah.
folks.
Yeah. Cool, cool. So Fukuoka is just behind. Yeah, it's just Fukuoka. Just kidding. Okay, sorry, to answer your question, you said teaching what got me into
Yeah,
teaching?
what got you into it? Were you was
Hmm.
there some motivation behind you getting into this career pathway, or is it something that you just happened to stumble upon?
Yeah, I would say, well, my mom was a teacher. She taught students who were disabled,
Mm,
specifically kids with cerebral palsy. And just, just how she conducts herself. She's always been, I think, just a good teacher. She was the one who taught me Japanese. She would sit me
mm,
down and, extremely patient. And so I think I always knew, like, oh, that's a viable option. I can become that, a teacher. Uh, and then I always really loved English. We talked about my love of books. And I think as I went on in my schooling, I was really not confident in my writing, partly because I was, Asian American. I was like, oh, Asian Americans don't really know, like,
mm,
that's our second language. So how could I actually be really good at that? But thankfully, I would say I had good teachers who believed in me, who sort of shaped my writing, who helped me craft it. And that helped me, gain more confidence. And as I felt more confident in both writing and reading, I was like, oh, maybe I could teach this subject. And so that's
mm,
kind of how it went on. And then I just really love kids. I have a multiple subject teaching credential with the authorization in English. So I technically actually can do K through
mm,
9, I think. And when I first signed up for a teaching job, I was hoping actually for more of like a second, third grade position, because they're just adorable. But then I was offered a sixth grade English language arts position, and I was kind of bummed at first. I was like, "Oh, I want the little kids." But maybe it'll be good to focus on one subject and just
mm,
sort of go from there. And then since then, I just love it. Like, middle school's so wacky.
mm,
It's so quirky. But I love that. I love that. And they're not quite, they're not, obviously not adults.
mm,
They're not like young children either. And they're just trying to figure out everything, their identity, their social circles, and yet they have that sort of naiveness. So
mm.
it's really fun to get in there with them and be like, you know what? Okay, so let's learn some life skills, not just, academics, and fun to walk with them.
If I was a fly on the wall, in your classroom, what would I uh, see? What would I hear?
I saw that question on your list. I'm like, that is such a great question. I would say hopefully laughter, because I think it's so important to just enjoy time together. I think especially after this pandemic,
Mm,
I mean, it's still going on, but just, being physically apart from everyone, only communicating through screens. It's been so great to be in the same room together again and just, have that close proximity and, so to laugh together. And recently, I'm quite proud of it. I came up with this really fun game. Do you ever watch James Corden segments,
oh,
like
s- uh,
the late night
s-
show?
no, but I just watch him when he's singing in the car.
Oh,
But
yeah, I mean, those are yeah,
yeah.
there's something called, "Where's Your TED At?" And
Uh,
basically you should totally do this in your class, but you put together a bunch of slides of really random images,
mm,
and, if you've seen an actual TED Talk, you'll see the presenter,
mm,
go through these slides and make some sort of point, but basically you start off with, you give them a topic. So, I went with something silly that my 7th graders would enjoy, which is like, why too much studying leads to diarrhea. Like, that was the subject. And then I had the most random image that followed. I had a graph that was just nonsense, and then another random image, like an inspirational quote, and then you have another one that says "in conclusion," and then another random image. And you just put it up there. They have no idea what's coming, but they
mm,
have to get up there and essentially then argue why too much studying leads to diarrhea, or whatever you want them to talk about. And the whole point of that was like, we're currently doing persuasive writing in
mm,
English, and so I was like, a lot of times you actually can sound really confident, even though your material is not. Um, it doesn't line up.
mm,
The sources maybe aren't even credible. This point has nothing to do with this second point, but if you can conduct yourself well and just sort of make it flow, it can be convincing. And so that's a lot of times the danger with writing, is that
mm,
no, I think what I was trying to say is that a lot of students, they get a little too comfortable and too confident, and they're like, oh, I know how to write this, I know how to
mm,
insert text and evidence, and I can make it wrap up. But I'm like, people know when it doesn't work out. Like people know when it's not flowing, when it's too random. Yeah, there was a bit of that educational component, but also it was just, just for laughs. Why not? And they love it. And so we've kind of gotten used to it as a routine. And sometimes when we have like 5 or 10 minutes, the kids will be like, TED Talk, and,
Oh,
something random. And it's really fun.
that's so cool. I wanted to ask you about, we say that teachers are lifelong learners,
Mm.
and what does that mean to you? Like teachers as lifelong learners?
Yeah, I think that's a mantra that everyone is not a statement people like all educators should definitely embody. I
Mm,
definitely identify with that. I think when you no longer are curious, you just stay stagnant. You're basically putting out in the world like I've learned everything and I'm good, And it's like
mm,
no, we can always be improving. We can always um, be more engaged, we can receive more input. So for me,
mm,
I would say I love listening to podcasts like yours. I just love really good content that opens my eyes. There's a couple like humorous ones that I love.
mm,
I love working it out with Mike Birbiglia because he's a great comedian, and he basically gets other comedians on and they work out material, and it's so cool. Basically you get this behind the scene um, look into the process of joke making.
mm,
And so that I'm not listening just for laughs, but like for learning. I'm learning about how actually difficult it is to be a comedian. I mean, I already knew that, but you really get this sort of like intimate look into that. So it's so cool. I love reading memoirs. I think oftentimes when you're down, when you read about somebody else going through an equally or even more difficult time, you realize like what you do have. It teaches you to be grateful, and yeah, just without absorbing all that, I think I would just stay the same, and that does not sound
mm,
interesting.
mm. Great answer.
Yeah. And then
S-
when you are out there like engaging with your students, if you're not having more to say, you're
mm,
essentially presenting the same face every time, and like that
mm,
that can't be inspiring, right, for the kids.
mm. Sometimes at the beginning of the year, you always school year, you hear people say they can just pick up and carry on, like they just pick up
Mm,
and you just continue. It's just another year. But I'm always like trying to reshuffle, like rewrite,
mhm,
like make content
mm,
in the classroom fresh and
mhm.
new, and I'm like, am I the only one to like why I'm not the only one doing it, but what I mean is like
I feel
I don't
you.
understand just this idea of just picking up and just continuing because it's another
Mm,
year. Like I freak out if I'm like teaching like the same,
mm,
like
mm,
I'm not saying I change everything, but I
mm,
definitely have to sit and think, okay, what's current? What's something that I can insert into a lesson? Or do you know
mm.
what I mean? I know it's extra.
Totally.
I know, but
No,
it's just
no,
kind of
no,
like,
no.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think there's something to be said about becoming comfortable in, let's say, a unit or,
Mm,
a certain part of your curriculum. You don't want to
mm,
feel wobbly all the time.
mm,
It's quite nice. I always think the third year is great for something.
mm,
I think by the third year, it feels quite solid. You can maybe
mm.
prep less on the weekend because you know what's coming. You know
Right.
exactly where in the book, blah 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 is going to happen. That's a nice feeling.
Mm,
But I think I love what you're saying, which is let's be critical and reflect. Obviously,
mm.
MIP, IB reflection, right? That's a huge part of it. Which
Wink,
my little
wink.
IB does. Yeah, no, it's important to reflect on it and go, okay, where can I be more inclusive? Where
Yeah,
can
like
I?
and tweaking
Yeah,
an
definitely.
activity here and there,
Mhm, mhm.
different learners appear in
Right,
front of you,
right, right.
like,
Yeah. I think for me, our school did an audit like not too long ago where we were like, let's really look at our English curriculum and think to ourselves, you know, are we being actually globally minded, as an
Mm,
international school? And that was a really good exercise. And, for me, it was like, wow, a lot of American authors. And I think America is very interesting because you have, blank American, Asian American, African American, you have
mm,
Saudi American, um, so there is diversity. It's not like it
mm,
doesn't exist, but like, hey, where are the UK books? Where are the books from Samoa?
mm,
The indigenous authors. And I found myself doing that this year, where I was like, I wanted to swap out a book, so I did, and I think I made a pretty good choice. But the author is oh my gosh, from oh my gosh, I should know this. Oh my goodness. Oh,
mhm.
Syrian American.
Oh,
And it's a lovely book, but I was like, it would be really cool to get someone just, from Syria,
mm,
and maybe not have the American part. Um, and yeah, that's just a great example of like, me being reflective and being like, are we doing our best?
mm,
Can we improve even more? Um, Not to say that the Syrian American voice is
right.
not valid, but that's definitely a different perspective, right, than someone who's
Mm,
from just Syria and is rooted in
mm.
Syria and has been there the whole time. So yeah, I appreciated that about my school. And
So I was wondering about the teaching space, the learning spaces. You're a design teacher and a language and literature teacher, so English. In your learning spaces, do you only hear English in the classroom, or are students allowed to? Okay, allowed is not the word. Are students free to use their first language if it's
Mm,
not English?
mhm.
What's it
Yeah,
like in your space?
I would say we definitely place, a bit of priority on English because they're essentially, they're not just signing up, they're paying for an education that's being delivered in English. But yeah, we definitely encourage mother tongue.
Mm,
We do hear a lot of different languages in my classroom, primarily Japanese, but also some Korean sometimes. There's some
mm,
Chinese speakers as well, but you don't hear it as much. And I would say it'd be interesting to be in a different country where I actually don't speak the mother tongue of that country. I think because I'm Japanese, I hear it and it's sort of
mm,
like, I understand it. I have that sort of like in and so, I can hear what they're saying. It doesn't like bother me as much. And I
mm,
would say I wonder if it was like if I was in Russia or something, it'd probably um um feel different, to my ears, and
mm,
I would notice it more probably. So yeah, it's yeah, it'd be interesting to pose that question to, like, somebody else who's
mm,
different position. I would say, uh, yeah, it's always gonna be, a bit of a struggle figuring out that balance because you don't want, over reliance on your first language, so you don't progress in your second one, which is again what you're sort of paying for. But then you don't want to stifle that side either. So I
mm,
think our school does a fairly good job of trying to, create an open, safe space, but then also emphasize when it's necessary, like, hey, we do want to up our vocabulary in English because
mm,
that will help us to communicate better and to, write better essays and yeah, just share our thoughts better and be more effective communicators.
mm,
So it's probably this dance that we always have to do of honoring
mm.
our tongue, but then also, focusing on what we can improve on as well.
Yeah, I mean, I thought I'd ask that question. It is a question that, when you go to PD, professional
Mhm,
development, courses, conferences, you hear these conversations. I mean, and I'm just talking about
mhm.
us here because we're in Japan, but
Right.
there's always that push and pull. There's like that talk about finding a
Mm,
balance because, for me, I don't like, I'm not intimidated. Like if I hear
mm, 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 mm.
and I think, if I hear other languages in the classroom, I'm not intimidated. I can understand Japanese. I think also with that, I think it's because I too am also a language learner. I also, I speak Samoan. I don't
Mm,
look at it as like someone speaking a different language, therefore I'm intimidated. That's
mm,
my view and that's my perspective. But I also understand and hear that, other teachers have shared, oh, I don't really understand Japanese. I don't know what's going on. I don't understand Korean. I don't know what's going on. And it's almost that line of like, I'm so intimidated. Are they talking about me? But I just, from my perspective, I like to look at it as like, I like to say, you know, uh, I like to just think positive, like they're not talking about us. It's that there are other students who perhaps, depending on their communication ability, English
Mm,
communication ability, sometimes they might need to revert and use vocabulary which is Korean, or ask a student in Japanese, or ask a
mm,
student in Russian or in Chinese, or like, could you help me here? I like to think
mm,
of it in that way rather than that, because I think that's growth mindset, as opposed to like,
mm,
oh,
mm,
they're talking about me,
mm,
therefore I refuse to let them. Do you know what I mean? And these are some of the conversations that you hear and that we have that are shared in PD spaces,
mm.
especially here in Japan. From my experience, that's just my experience though. So
Right.
yeah, like that's why I
Yeah.
wanted to ask.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think too there's a difference between letting kids just sort of run wild and
Mm,
say whatever and talk about whatever because they're just sort of like, you know, um if they're just conversing, it's like I think you want to honor like the shared community too, where it's
mm-hmm.
just like in this context, it is better if we are all speaking one language because then we're all on the same page and we know what's
Mm.
being said and therefore you're very clear like oh this person's not talking smack or whatever because as a Japanese speaker I can hear when having that sort of conversation and I literally will be like no that's not okay but then other times it's like um yeah I think it's just it's I think it's important for the kids too to dip in and be like what's appropriate in this
Mm,
scenario and if it's getting vocabulary help no problem but if it's like
mm,
I'm gonna use language to purposely exclude these others like
mm,
that I don't think is okay
mm,
um and then also, like, I think as educators, it's important to not shy away from it and actually dip into those language differences and highlight them, as like a strength and being like, oh, so, if you're a student, I'd be like, oh, so Rosa, like in your language, like, how would you say this? Like, oh,
mm,
cool. And then
mm,
we all learn together.
mm.
Rather than you like whispering like off to the side or something, and,
Yeah.
and being like there probably is a difference here. So let me call it out and like invite you in and being like,
Mm.
hey, can you dip into your knowledge and maybe share with all of us collectively? And yeah, it's just sort of it's tricky, right, to be an educator
Yes.
to
Yeah.
maneuver all of that. Yeah, yeah,
And
takes
and yeah,
skill.
so I think it's finding that yeah, like you've said and shared like the different scenarios. And then also, part of it is, like classroom management is a huge part of it, and then
Mm,
student like buy-in, right? So
right,
the
right, right.
stakeholders in the classroom, it's finding that balance, which you're absolutely right. Definitely in international schools, it's what my experience is here. It's difficult. And it's something that you kind of like, as you continue to foster that
Mm,
classroom, that joy of learning, or that trying to uh be inclusive and foster that classroom climate.
mm,
All
mm,
these little factors have to tie into it. Not
mhm,
easy at all, by the way. Like I
mm,
share all this to say that, I love listening to these conversations, and listening to different teachers' opinions and perspectives on it. And uh it's hard. It's hard work, but
hey,
it's
lifelong
important.
learners, right? We're learning
Lifelong
as we
learners, yeah. Misconceptions that people have about teachers.
go. Probably that sometimes that we're lazy, we just like we do what we talked about earlier. It's like, you just recycle,
Yeah.
you get the summers off and you just do this thing over and over and yeah, wow, what an easy job. But I think what's sad is that, are there some teachers who do that? Of course, just like
Mm,
there are really shady lawyers or,
mm.
hopefully not lazy like surgeons or anything. I'm like, please be careful with my life. But like, yeah, you have people who get stagnant in any job, right?
Mm,
But hopefully, well, there are teachers who are doing phenomenal work, and it's always important to look to them and highlight them,
mm.
for the few that make the whole profession bad.
So, you're okay. So, when you're not teaching, when you're
Mhm.
not an educator inspiring young folks in the classroom, outside of the classroom, you are a amigurumi artist or
Yeah.
crochet plushie creator. First of all, for those who don't know what amigurumi is, could you
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Well, what I love is it's actually Japanese, I think, because
Mm.
I mean the word amigurumi that is Japanese, and
Mm,
ami means to knit or I think crochet, and like guru guru is like to go around and around. And so
mm,
if you look at the construction of an actual amigurumi piece, you're crocheting, but you're doing it in rounds, and you're creating these sort of circular objects or like long tubes, and then you put it together to make figures. You
mm,
can make figures, animals, whatever you can design. And so yeah, I love it. I got into it actually because of my mom, because she has schizophrenia. She lives
mm,
in the countryside in Japan, and when in the past when I've come over to visit her, it's always been, they're very emotionally taxing, these visits. And also, like, there's the illness part, but then also she lives in the countryside, and everyone, when they think of Japan, they think of Tokyo and lights and, like, all this fanciness. But I'm like, she lives in the boonies. Like, like all you have are spiders and like really gross weather. And for the longest time, she didn't even have running hot water. She
mm,
finally has a bathtub now that will turn on, and then hot water comes out automatically. So things are quite old school. And so whenever I would go, I'd make sure I had something to do. And, I've gone through several hobbies. Like, I used to be really into beading. I do a bit of lettering as well. But, one summer I was at a bookstore, saw this kit for Star Wars amigurumi, and I was like, this looks cool. Like, whoa, I've never seen like people make figures out of yarn. And I was like, huh, this looks cool. So I bought that, started making them. And then on the internet, you can find so many patterns for
mm.
free. Some you have to pay for, but a lot of content out there for free. So I started doing that, and it's quite awesome because it's so limitless. Like, when you're done, when you're bored with something, you're like, well, I want to try a plant now, and then you can. I want to make, fake pasta. And then there's like 10 patterns for that. So yeah, it's kind of this hobby that keeps on giving.
Mm. And so are you a Studio Ghibli fan?
Yeah, for those of you who can watch the video, this is the medium-sized version of it. It's
Totoro!
missing its little stripes, but yeah, it's almost there.
Wow.
You asked how did I or why Studio
Sugoi
Ghibli?
na.
And I actually was not. I think I saw a couple of the films when I was younger. Like, I remember Kiki's Delivery Service, Princess Mononoke, which was a little scary for me when I was young. And liked it. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. But I think there's just something so special about Totoro, right?
Wow.
If you've seen it, I think for me, it's the fact that it's set in this countryside in
Mm.
Japan, and I mean, it's exactly like where my mom lives. I was just complaining about the countryside, but on the flip side, it is really beautiful. It's quite serene.
Yeah.
There's so much nature, and just the little scenes that that particular film captures, like them eating, a really crunchy cucumber, straight from the garden. What else do they do? Just walking along the rice fields, like, that
Mm.
those are my summers. That's my memory of Japan, and when I think of childhood and visiting kind of my hometown here. Um, so yeah, I have that personal connection. And then, in the movie, the mother is sick and my mom was sick.
Mm.
So I think there are definitely those are some reasons why I connect to it so deeply. But I mean, look at this guy. I mean, he's just so adorable. He is so
Oh
adorable.
my goodness.
Whole storyline too, someone explained it to me as there's actually no antagonist. Like,
Mm.
it's just a story, and it just sort of unfolds. It's really magical. And I found, but for me, so I've made little characters before. Like, this is I've made really tiny ones too. This is a current make. I'm very proud of it.
Wow.
Hipster one.
Kawaii.
It has little glasses as well.
Yeah, kawaii na. What? Cute.
This llama looks like it reads Rosa.
Hey, I need those glasses. Hey, with my
We
one
tried-
eye lens right now during this filming, I mean, that's a whole nother situation. Carry on,
Right,
sis.
So I was used to making like even micro things, like, kind of regular sized ones as well.
Mm,
And I was like, you know what? I want to make a big one because why not? And my friend, he's a creator. His name's Mikey. He's
mm,
amazing. He makes like these 3D wood laser cut prints and then stacks
mm,
them up to create images. He's also a Ghibli fan, and we have this cool exchange where sometimes he'll make me something and then I'll be like, hey, let me throw something back at you. And he wanted a big Totoro, so I was like, okay. So I go to the store, buy this yarn, and I'm like working on it, and I'm like, okay, it's a lot bigger than I thought. And I'm like, Mikey, so it's gonna be about like 6 feet tall. Is that cool with you? And he's like, where am I gonna put that? So, and at that point, I already bought like a bunch of the yarn. I couldn't, I,
mm,
I didn't really want to return it. And I was like, I guess I gotta see this through, And so I
mm,
just started doing it, and definitely almost gave up like at 1 or 2 points because it is an expensive project if you ever want to
mm.
make something that big. And doing it, I was like, what am I doing? Is this worth it? But my other friend Carlos was like, he was being really funny. He's like, we do not give up in this household. He's like, "That's his house while I was making it." And that definitely inspired me to keep going. And I'm so glad I did because a learner profile trait would have
Right?
is it
Oh my.
perseverance? I don't think perseverance. Discipline, maybe. Or no, no,
Oh,
no. Principled. I think that's an ID.
yeah.
But yeah, I was like, I want to persevere, and I did, and I'm
Mm.
I'm so glad I did because it brought so many people joy.
Yeah, and then your work was exhibited at your school, right?
Yeah, that
I
was
mean, your
really
kids must have been like, "What? Miss, you're the coolest."
yeah. Well, it was really cool because I actually got to share it even a bit earlier with my design classes. I've been
Mm,
teaching design for about 3 years now, and I that's something kind of I fell into. I don't have a technical design background, but I really do love art and
mm,
aesthetics, and feel like hopefully I have a pretty good grasp on that, and definitely am very familiar with the process of creating and designing, with my crafts. And so I was
mm,
like, this is a perfect example of how I actually didn't design the pattern. This amazing guy named Petter Medic did,
mm.
and he has a really great process on how to make it. He has even video tutorials embedded in the pattern, and so that's your criterion A. You have all the research and the and or maybe that's criterion B. You have your plan. And so I took them through that. I had slides, I had videos of me making it, and I was like, da 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 da, finished product. What
Wow.
do you think I needed to make this happen? And the kids were just like, what? They're
Mm,
like, where's ours? Why did you leave it in America? I think that is what shocked them. They're like, why isn't it here?
mm.
I was like, well, if I had bought a plane ticket, maybe, but there would have been no way to transport it. Um,
Man.
yeah, so I really enjoyed that, being able to share. And then it was my art teacher friend, or the art teacher at our school, who very graciously was like, Julia, we should do an exhibit on your stuff because why not? The kids uh, need to see like that we are ourselves as educators create, and maybe we actually are artists ourselves. And so
Mm.
that was just so special, and she helped me kind of curate it and put it together. And so very cool to share with the wider community.
Wow,
Yeah.
subarashi.
It was funny
So
when
cool.
I was putting it up and parents were in the lobby, and you could see someone like, what? And there was another teacher. He's new this year. He probably hasn't seen Totoro either.
Yeah.
Maybe he's seen like a picture of it somewhere before, but not really understanding the context. And I had
Mm.
most of it up, all these photos and stuff, and he was just staring at it and going, I have no idea what this is, but it's really cool. He said, I have no idea what's happening right now, but this is really cool.
Man, I was wondering if anyone from Studio Ghibli have they actually has anyone reached out to
I
you
know.
or
Oh, that's the dream, right? No, I think
oh
some people got confused because there was a Studio Ghibli fan
yeah,
group that reached out and took those images and
that's
put it
so
on their
cool.
site. And so, and the icon looks like an actual Ghibli thing,
Mm,
and so I think people thought like, oh, the real thing picked you up, but no, to put it on record.
Yeah.
Actual Studio Ghibli did not get involved, but yeah,
But
I would love
still.
that. I'm like, hey, Studio Ghibli.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah,
What other sorry,
hmm.
carry on. Go ahead.
Oh no, I think actually a dream of mine after teaching for a bit, I plan to take some time off, and during that time, I'd love to like secure some sort of grant where I can
Mm.
highlight just the art of perhaps amigurumi, like do some sort of exhibit, and like these pop-up shops and or pop-up museums are kind of popular right now, especially it's
Yes.
all for the gram. And if I could like put up picturesque um rooms where it's like, let's say it's like Totoro themed, and then the next one would be like a sushi conveyor belt with like giant sushi plushes. I think that would
Oh.
be so cool. And what I would really love to do with that project is highlight the creators, because I make stuff, but I actually don't create the patterns often. I
Mm.
think I am capable of it. I could because I know enough about it, but it actually is a whole thing, and it involves a lot of math, a lot of counting, a lot of trial and error, a
Mm.
lot of prototyping, and people don't really see that. And also, I get kind of annoyed when some people don't credit the pattern makers. They just, put it out there. And to be fair, I probably have done it once or twice myself, but that was, I was like in a hurry or something. But I do try to credit because, it's not me making it's me making it, but it's not me creating the whole thing. Someone else came up
Mm.
with the concept and then taking that and just bringing it to life. So it'd be so cool to highlight other probably APPI creators, like be
Mm.
very selective with who I'm getting the patterns from as well, and just to have it be the celebration of Asian art. Like that is a dream I have. So
Oh.
we'll see. Yeah, I'm like, hey, grant people, where are you at? Where are my grants?
Yeah, I would love to see you do a pop-up store or like I just feel like you said, everyone's out there visiting pop-up stores for the
Mm,
gram, but really celebrating,
mm, mm,
the
mm.
art of amigurumi and like you said, the creators, the
Mhm.
designers behind the patterns, and of course your work, putting you on blast out there yourself. But it's
Thank you.
like I could see, like honestly, I was just like, Roses. This is a whole situation. No,
Yeah. Yeah,
this is
I think for me it was really cool to see so many people literally global wide come together.
yeah.
It wasn't like, "Oh, Julia's great." It was like, "Wow, all these people really love Totoro." And,
Mm,
on the it went big on Facebook, and because some people posted it, and, when you look through the comments, it's all these people in different languages being like, "Wow, sugoi!" Like, "I don't
mm,
know other languages, but insert them here."
yeah.
Like, "Wow," like, "Que bueno," and
Oh,
to be able to scroll through that and be like, "I don't even know what this says, but, it's
mm,
clearly positive," and then seeing someone else respond in their language, and, people having these, like, private/public conversations about just art and Miyazaki in general, and Totoro. It was just really, really, moving, and, I actually printed some of those out for the exhibition at my school to be like, "Hey, like, Japanese culture is,
mm.
it's popping. People love it." So yeah, that would be super, super cool.
I mean, it's a side of Japanese culture that we do not hear a lot about. So the fact that, there are definitely elements
Mm.
of Japanese culture that are really pushed to
Mhm,
the fore, but
mhm.
this is cool.
Right, so
Arts
kinda
and
like the
crafts,
opposite of
man.
robots.
Yeah.
Like, let's go analog, yeah.
Right? And then
Yeah.
okay, so art as a form of healing or, finding peace in what you do, is that what creating is for you?
Mm.
Is that, yeah, what is
Yeah, most
creating
certainly.
for you?
I just love your questions. I'm like, "This girl on point." This is why I came on. No, I definitely think it is all those things. Art, I would say growing up, it was the books that gave me a lot of comfort,
Mm,
and just yeah, art. Like, I always loved, in kindergarten, we would have these different stations, and I love the painting section because that feel of, like, paint and, an easel and just this, like, thick beautiful paint, being able to just like slap it on this canvas,
mm,
and, move it around like that. Physicality was really like just really cool for me. There's just something really soothing about it. Crocheting is very meditative, and
mm,
for me, Yeah, it's just become this really helpful tool to zone out, and since
Mm.
showing the kids my Totoro, a lot of, especially boys in particular, have come up to me being like, "Oh, can you teach me how to do that?" And I have one
Oh.
boy who just completed a Pikachu, and it's like, "Yay, yes, let's spread this joy, let's spread this technique, this art form," and that's something I do appreciate in Japan. I feel like it's not the arts aren't super gendered. Like it doesn't a lot of I think it's very I never get like, oh, that's like for girls, like crochet is for
Right.
it's
Right,
sort of
right.
like that's so cute. Let me do it. Like it's
Mm.
very sort of it appeals to everybody. Whereas I think, in America I can see maybe some people being more like, oh, that seems feminine.
Right.
But I don't know, for some reason it feels a little more accepted in Japan, and so it's been really cool to see, especially kind of more of these like um, STEM minded, like I can see them being future engineers or something, like
Mm.
take an interest in it and look at it from more of like a um, mathematical standpoint, because it's really a lot of counting, it's a lot of measuring and
Right.
designing, and for them to be like, how do you do this like logistically, like having that sort of mindset, and being able to
Mm.
share and be like, yeah, it's not a girl thing, it's a anyone can do it thing, and being able to share that has been really really special.
Oh, I love that so much. Yeah, I mean, I think especially like when you're in like when you're a teacher, it's
Mm,
always you need to have that other like outlet. Like you need
mm,
to be doing something else that really helps you disconnect from that teacher life. So
mm,
I just like try and be intentional in terms
mm,
of like I mean it's hard, and you
mm,
know this as teachers,
right.
try and leave school life at school,
Mhm.
try not to bring things home to Mark. I think I've been better since being here in Japan, but
That's
yeah, you do have to be intentional and with your time and really know when to like disconnect, not just for wellness and health, but mental
mm,
health,
right,
like
right.
so I absolutely love hearing that your students
Mm,
whether they're girls or boys, are just interested
right,
in
right.
just, being able to create. And it honestly, like when I create with clay and stuff, like
Mm,
it's like energy is just,
so
you can
healing.
just put that energy in. It's just
Mm,
so like calming and it really, everyone, I just believe everyone has that creative side to them. And if you're able to like create this outlet and do it through this craft or
mm,
art, it's the best feeling, I tell you.
mhm. Yeah, I was gonna ask, do you have an outlet of some sort? You mentioned clay.
Yeah, I do. I make earrings. Like I love colors. I make it so that I wear it or I will gift it to friends.
Right,
And
right, right.
we're talking about this, but you mentioned like countryside Japan. I
Mm,
actually prefer countryside Japan.
interesting.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
like I when I get the chance, I'm always like I love going on the train and going
Hey,
out
let's go to
to
my
the
mom's.
countryside. Yeah, let's do it. Like honestly, like
No
I know
joke.
everyone here is like, oh, Tokyo. And I
Mm,
think I've said this before in here, I always encourage like when I'm talking to other teachers,
mm,
oh, you
mm,
should check out these places out
mm,
in
mm.
the WAPs, like because I feel like Japan is beautiful. There's
Right,
so
right.
much beautiful greenery, reminds me of New Zealand. Get out and see
Mm.
that side of it.
I was gonna say one thing about I had two things actually, podcasting and creating,
Mm,
but I think especially for our young children now, I mean,
mm.
they're not, we have teenagers too, but I think what I love about crafting is like no more screen time, like you're
Yeah.
physically removed from your device, and I think, our devices have brought us a lot of joy, a lot of entertainment, you can
Mm,
educate yourself on them. But also, you get sucked into this whole internet world. And I mean, because even
mm,
I experienced that. And, it's designed to do that. So to make a clean break and be like, I'm going to put this away and be immersed in the now. I mean, that the crafting helps you do that. So I feel like
mm,
that's really powerful. And then podcasting, it's like basically you get this opportunity to like have deep conversations with people, right? And
mm,
that itself too is like a chance to be in the now. So I can see that being like a healing space, and one that's not just something you do because it's like, oh, that's just something, as it's part of my educational thing. It's
mm,
it's like it actually, I think, helps people with their just like personal life almost, because it gives you
Mm,
this out, right, to talk about it. And I love the kind of free roaming conversations. And, I think
mm.
I mentioned earlier, I personally listen to podcasts because it helps me to sort of zone out in a way, and zone out, but also zone in,
Yeah, I
without
get
a
that.
particular thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, podcasting has been like I've been able to connect with just so many people that I never would have thought.
So cool.
Well,
Yeah, yeah.
basically everyone that's come on the show, like
Mm,
connecting on such a different level. Like I think I might have said to you like earlier off, like it's more important to create that safe space. Like
right.
I did tell you I over prepare. I'm so extra like that because I want to be like duh, 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 but then I
Mm-mm-mm.
find that once the guest is on, like it's so cool because I'm always just feeding off the energy of the guest
Mm,
and really thinking about their I'm listening to the responses, and it's okay. Like I've learned, this coming week we drop episode 100, and I've
oh,
and this whole
congrats.
time, I'm learning that it's okay. Like, yeah, of course, over prepare, but it's okay if I don't ask all the questions because,
Mm-mm-mm-mm.
I'm just so grateful to everyone that has been on the show because, people a lot of well, especially from New Zealand, especially the Pacific Islanders, you know, I want to give flowers to these folks who have been, in the music industry for years, but not getting their props and not getting their
Mm,
flowers, or celebrating authors or celebrating educators, just celebrating everyday
right.
people, because these are stories that have they're not championed.
Mm,
There are definitely stories out there that we see on social media that get championed the most, but what I love about the space, or what I've learned, is that everyone has a story and has
mm,
has taken a certain path to get where they are today. So, and most of us, we're still learning, we're still growing. So just
mm,
I feel blessed, but I'm just so grateful just for everyone that has come into this space and said, you know what, I trust that this is a space that I
mm.
can share the story, so, or I can share
Right.
my journey. And it's honestly, it just that is super, like, that just it makes me feel some kind of way, like, every time,
Mm,
like, even today, knowing that you're an educator, but also an artist and creative, but then and then also hearing, that you're a huge advocate for mental health. I mean, these are important, like, conversations that
mm,
and I'm glad that you've suggest that you could be here today to join the
mm.
Reads with Rosa podcast family, and like, get your journey and get your voice heard out there. Like, we need to
Mm,
champion stories that are not being heard.
for
And
sure.
I'm here for it. I love to give flowers to
Mm,
people, be like, hey, I see you. You
mm.
should be celebrated. You need to be
You need Reads with
champions.
Rosa swag. I don't know if you're you need stickers. We gotta go stickers, hoodies. Yeah, we gotta do a
um,
full collection.
so I was thinking about Japan. 3 favorite foods?
Ooh, great
Just
question.
3? Just 3?
Okay,
It's just.
sushi.
Yes.
Um, uh, mochi, but I guess just like what is it called? Manju in general. When there's the
Oh,
red
yes,
bean. I
yes,
don't know what I'm
yes.
doing with my fingers. Okay, so sushi, manju, mochi with filling, and then
Mm.
let's see, what else do I love? um, I would say udon. I really like the
Oh.
simplicity of it. It's very like filling, yet like simple yet really good.
Mm.
Yeah.
3 favorite places in Japan that you've traveled?
Oof, I would say Okinawa.
Mm.
I really liked Oita and
Mm.
Yakushima. Yakushima's beautiful.
Okay, 3 things that you wouldn't recommend to tourists. Because I see people on TikTok recommending stuff, and I'm like, liars. Why are you doing that? Stop that right
That's
now. Cut it out.
interesting.
So 3 things that you
Mm,
wouldn't recommend
huh.
tourists to do.
Yeah. Okay. I would say I think some of the kind of higher end, like fancy places in a city like Tokyo, like no
Mm.
real need. Like
Yeah.
go like you said, enjoy the countryside. Like just check
Mm.
that out. Just to do that. Yeah, I'd say that. What else? Oh, this one's hard. A little harder. I guess, yeah, within that, maybe there's 3 fancy things you don't need to visit.
I agree. You're an advocate for mental health.
Mm,
You know, um, tell us a little bit about the work. Are you connected to any organizations? I know this is a huge part. It's something very important to you. So could you share a little bit about this?
I've done some work with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. I've given some talks for local chapters. They have this really great event called Out of the Darkness, where they encourage people to walk a certain length, and after that, you raise funds, and then after that, you come together and hear from survivors or suicide loss survivors, and
Mm,
since I'm a suicide loss survivor, I just share my experience and what helps me keep going despite some of this hard stuff. And I'd say in terms of advocacy work, it's just about being real and
mm,
and being real with students whenever possible. I think obviously bringing up suicide is going to be a bit contentious. It's going to be there's going to be a lot of people uncomfortable with that, but it's actually going through a lot of our kids' minds. And I think there's actually probably more danger in not talking about it at all and kind of sweeping it under the rug. So, yeah, I try to tastefully bring it out, carefully bring it out when I can,
mm.
and just be like, you know what, I've been through this. I have learned how to cope with certain really hard emotions, and here are some tools. And so that's kind of the what I've been doing with my story.
Mm. And then for you, if along that line, but thinking about self care, and I
Mm,
know, as a creator, you have your art, which is a form of healing. It's a time for you to like really appreciate that downtime. But what are some things
mm,
that you, outside of that,
mm,
outside of teaching and outside of your arts and craft, what are some other things that you like to do to really take care of yourself?
mm.
Like self care.
Right, right. I think that's so important. I cherish really great, beautiful, deep talks with people like this one. I
Mm,
think being able to just have uninterrupted time where you can just be like, "Bleh, this is everything that's going on in my mind," and
mm,
to have somebody hold that for you is really special. So I think sometimes I do that through therapy. Sometimes it's just a good friend.
mm,
But knowing who's sort of in your corner and creating
mm,
that safety net for yourself, I think is super important. That and long
mm.
bath. A nice
That can
double
work
bath.
too.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then book recommendations, like, do you have a book or something that you want to recommend to the audience, to the
Mm.
listeners?
Yeah, I knew question was coming up, so I'm like, I'm gonna remember the author's name. I read this memoir called "Beautiful Country" by
Mm,
Quan. I hope I'm saying it right. Quan Julie Wang. So good. I've been reading a lot of memoirs because I think that's just my genre. I just
mm,
love reading real life accounts of people and the hardships they've gone through. But this one in particular stood out to me because my friend Jackie suggested it, and she knows I like memoirs. And this
mm,
one, it's written through a child's perspective. A young girl and her family moved from China to America, and it's not that long ago either. It's set in recent times, and I think there's sometimes this perception of like, oh, Asians taking over jobs, and oh, they're so
mm,
educated, and da 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 da. But they're actually living in extreme poverty. There's mental illness. There's just so much hardship. There's sweatshop stuff going on.
mm,
They're forced to work, under really horrible conditions, and she's just this young girl trying to get through life, and she's misplaced and put in special ed, even though it's just a language thing. And I think what I like about that particular book is it's not an adult recounting what happened, but her actually being first person in that first grade classroom, and
mm,
just really, and she has this like humorous way of speaking and sharing the stories. And I think when you add humor to tragedy, or yeah, you're able to laugh about it, because time has passed. It allows you to access some of the more painful content in a better way. And it just yeah, you're able to kind of take it in a bit better.
mm.
So it's a really hard read, but it's really funny as well. And yeah, I highly recommend that one.
I wanted to ask, do you
Hmm.
listen to the audiobooks? Because
Oh,
I
that is
love memoirs, but I
mm, mm,
love
mm.
it even more when it's an audiobook and it's narrated by, usually they are narrated by the author. I recommend it. I recommend you do that.
Trevor knows that
I
one is
know.
me because of the accents. Oh, so good.
Yes, the
I would
jokes.
so good. So I actually tend not to listen to audiobooks. I'm just old school like that. I like reading. But I do see what you're saying about memoirs, and I'm so glad I listened to Born a Crime, Trevor
Yes.
Noah, through audiobooks. That is the only way to do it. Yeah,
Yes.
I should try it with some other authors. Yeah, I guess I'm just old school.
Nah, yeah, like for me, I will read the memoir. I love memoirs as well. I read the book, but there are some where I'm like, oh, I need to listen to this. It's just a whole nother
Mm,
intimate connection to the story. And actually, for me, it's only been a few years that I started really getting into audiobooks. Not all the time, but I read a lot of ebooks as well, and of course, just the
mm,
books in general itself. But
mhm.
it's because I commute to work. So,
Oh,
if
so
I'm not
genius.
listening to
Yeah.
music, I'm like, if it's a really good book and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna switch and read the audio, listen to the audio.
Mm,
Yeah. So, but yes, you're right, Trevor Noah. Oh my gosh, absolute fave. I'm such a fangirl.
so good.
um. Oh, okay. I'm going to look up that memoir that you mentioned.
Yeah, it's really
Um, I was wondering, as we begin to wrap up
good.
and thinking about, I can't stop thinking about life size, human size Totoro. Do you have any future projects? I know you're wrapping up, you know, Fukuoka and life there, but in terms of
Mm,
art projects, do you have plans to make other life human sized uh, projects,
joy.
or yeah,
Yeah.
so much joy in it, like is and teaching aspirations? What do you
Mm,
have planned, or are you working towards, over the next year or so, or a few months?
right. Well, I think in terms of projects, I would love to make more, but I think I need to work out some sort of sustainable way to do that because these
Mm,
take tons of money to make. I think I would be very interested in making a couple more of the Totoros, maybe auctioning them off. I think an auction would be so cool. Maybe even,
yes.
giving some proceeds to a wonderful cause. But yeah, it's just that yarn is so expensive. It's hard to do it without, a grant or something.
Mm,
And then let's see. I really want to travel. I have some really good friends in New Zealand, so I want to go there. Um, and yeah, and I'd love to see like the indigenous culture there as well. And just yeah, just extend my view by taking in all these different sites, expand my worldview. And I think travel really helps with that. And I do see myself continuing to teach, like being in the
mm,
teaching space, because I just love connecting with young people and feel like there's so much work that needs to be done in that realm. So yeah, I don't see it straying too far away, but who knows? Very open, and I guess we'll just see where life takes me.
mm. I want to say a huge thank you, Julia. Thank you so much for, coming into this space. I'm so grateful that you came on the show today to share your journey as an artist, as an advocate doing important work around mental health, but also um, as an educator, impacting the lives of young folks at your school. I want to wish you all the best, as you prepare to make that move back home and wrap up, life here in Japan.
Thank you so much, Rosa. I likewise. It's been an honor for me. I feel so privileged to have been asked to have made it on, to have been asked to come on. And yeah, I think just throwing it right back at you. I think please continue to do your work. I see, what you're doing with the podcast. That's an art in a way. Like you are spreading awareness. You're bringing, some hard issues to light, and encouraging conversations that are hard to have. And it takes courageous people, I think. So I commend you. I look forward to your episodes dropping, and yeah, it's just so mutual. So I'm so thankful for our hopefully blossoming friendship. And yeah, let's definitely keep in touch.
Let's do it.